Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. I hope you enjoy the content. Please subscribe.
Mama, the thunder is so loud.
It's all right, my son. We are safe here.
Mama?
Shh, I'm here.
This is a true story of Amina, a single mother in Nigeria who had nothing but a broken heart and two hungry children. The night was very dark and the rain was falling hard. Boom, boom, boom. The thunder made a loud noise in the sky. The rain beat the old metal roof of the tiny room. Tat, tat, tat. The water dropped from the ceiling. It dropped inside a small plastic bucket on the floor. Inside this small room lived a young mother named Amina. She did not have a husband to help her. She was all alone with her two little children. The boy was named Toby. He was 5 years old. The small girl was named Chidi. She was only 3 years old. They were both sleeping on a thin mat on the floor. They pulled a torn cloth over their bodies because the night was very cold. Amina was not sleeping. She sat in the corner of the dark room. Her eyes were red and warm tears were rolling down her face. She was crying quietly so that her children would not wake up. Amina was very sad because life was too hard. She looked at the kitchen corner of the room. There was no food there. There was no rice. There was no yam. There was no beans. The kitchen cupboard was completely empty. Suddenly, a loud sound came from Toby's belly. Grumble, grumble. It was the sound of hunger. Even in his sleep, Toby turned and rubbed his belly. Amina felt a sharp pain in her heart. A mother does not like to hear her children cry for food. Yesterday, they only ate a small piece of boiled corn. Today, there was nothing at all. Oh God, Amina whispered into the dark. Please help me. I do not want my children to die of hunger. Show me a way. Just then, the rain stopped falling. The room became very quiet. Toby opened his small eyes. He saw his mother sitting in the dark, wiping her eyes. The little boy crawled on his hands and knees across the floor. He sat next to Amina and used his tiny warm hand to wipe a tear from her cheek. Mommy, do not cry, Toby said in a soft, sweet voice. Do not cry. My teacher said God loves us. God will give us big bread today. When Amina heard her 5-year-old boy speak with so much hope, something changed inside her. The heavy sadness in her heart began to melt away. A new strength came into her body. She stood up straight. She looked at her hands. Yes, Amina said to herself, I will not sit here and cry anymore. Tears cannot buy bread. I must work with my hands. She looked around the room to see what she could use. In the far corner, covered by an old sack, she saw something. It was a small pile of raw cassava roots. Her brother had brought them from the farm 3 days ago before he traveled away. The cassava roots were long, brown and dirty with mud. Next to the cassava was an old, heavy iron frying pan that belonged to her grandmother. The pan was black from old smoke, but it was still very strong. Amina knew what she had to do. In Nigeria, people love to eat garri. Garri is made from cassava. If you fry the cassava very well, it turns into crunchy white grains. People buy it to drink with cold water and sugar, or they mix it with hot water to eat with soup. I will make garri, Amina told Toby with a small smile. I will fry this cassava and sell it so we can buy food. Amina ran out of the room. The ground outside was muddy and wet from the rain. The sun was just coming up in the sky, turning the clouds a soft yellow color. She did not have shoes.
so the cold mud squeezed between her toes. She walked to the backyard of the compound. She gathered old wet sticks of wood. She also found her very last paper money note inside her pocket. It was a very small amount of money, but she used it to buy a matchbox and a small bottle of kerosene from a neighbor. She set the wet wood on the ground and poured the kerosene on it. She struck a matchstick. Fuff! A bright orange flame jumped up. The wood was wet, so it began to give off thick grey smoke. The smoke went straight into Amina's eyes and nose. It made her cough loudly. Cough! Cough! Her eyes burned and more tears came out, but this time they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of hard work. Amina took a small knife. She sat on a low wooden stool and began to peel the brown skin off the cassava roots. Underneath the dirty brown skin, the cassava was beautifully white and clean. After peeling, she used a sharp tin plate with holes in it to rub the cassava up and down. Scratch, scratch, scratch. She grated the cassava into fine, wet white paste. Her fingers hurt, and the skin on her thumb rubbed against the sharp tin, but she did not stop. She thought of Toby and Chidi, and her hands moved faster. Next, she tied the wet cassava paste inside a clean sack and squeezed all the sour water out of it. When the paste was dry, she poured it inside the big black iron pan sitting over the hot fire. Now came the hardest part. Amina took a flat piece of wood and began to stir the cassava in the hot pan. The fire was very hot. Heat rushed up into her face. The sweat began to pour down her forehead like rain. Her arms felt very heavy and tired. Stirring Garri over a hot fire is a job that makes the whole body ache. But Amina kept moving the wood. Swish, swish, swish. Slowly, the wet cassava paste began to dry up. It turned into beautiful, crisp white grains. The sweet smell of fresh Garri filled the morning air. Little Chidi was awake now. She ran out of the room and clapped her small hands. "Mommy is cooking! Mommy is cooking!" she cheered. Amina smiled through the smoke. She carefully poured the hot, dry Garri out of the black pan and into a wide plastic basin. The Garri looked like clean white snow. It was perfect. She let it cool down for a few minutes. Then Amina lifted the heavy plastic basin and balanced it carefully on top of her head. She did not have a shop. She did not have a table. Her legs were tired from working all morning, but she held Toby's hand with her left arm and carried little Chidi on her back with a wrapper. With the heavy basin of fresh white Garri steady on her head, Amina walked out of the compound gate and stepped onto the busy, noisy street, ready to face the world. Amina walked slowly into the big market. The sun was now very high and very hot in the sky. It beat down on her head, making the heavy plastic basin of Garri feel like a mountain on her neck. All around her, the market was very loud and busy. "Buy your tomatoes! Buy your fresh pepper!" People were shouting. Large yellow buses, called Danfo, were honking their horns, beep, beep, and splashing muddy water from the road. Amina held Toby's small hand very tightly. Little Chidi was fast asleep on her back, her small head resting against Amina's shoulder. Amina looked for a place to stand, but the market was very crowded. There were tables and umbrellas everywhere. She saw an empty space near a big gutter and walked toward it. But before she could set her basin down, a big woman with an angry face pushed past her. This woman was selling yams. She looked at Amina's old torn clothes and laughed a mean laugh. "Hey, get out of here," the young woman shouted, waving her hand in the air. "You cannot stand here with your dirty children. This space is for big market women, not for small girls selling garri in a basin. Go away, go home." Amina's heart dropped. She felt very small. Other people in the market turned to look at her, but nobody helped her. Some people even laughed. Amina felt tears coming to her eyes again, but she looked down at Toby. Toby was looking up at her with big trusting eyes. He was hungry, and he was counting on his mommy. Amina swallowed her tears and walked away from the mean woman. She walked to the very edge of the market, far away from the good spaces. There was a big old mango tree there. The ground under the tree was dusty, but it had a little bit of shade. Amina carefully lifted the heavy basin off her head and set it on the ground. Her neck felt stiff and sore, and her arms were shaking from the weight. She took a clean blue nylon bag from her pocket and spread it on the dirt under the tree. "Toby, sit here with your sister," she said softly, gently moving Chidi from her back to the nylon bag. The two children sat together. They were very quiet because they were too tired and hungry to play. Amina stood straight next to her basin. She took a small metal cup she used for measuring the garri. She lifted it high and let the white grains pour back into the basin. Shh! It made a nice clean sound. "Come and buy your sweet garri," Amina cried out. Her voice was small and shaking at first. "Fresh garri is here. Very clean garri." But nobody stopped. For 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, people just walked past her. They did not even look at her basin. They went to the big sellers with large shops and colorful umbrellas. The sun moved across the sky, and the shade of the mango tree disappeared. Now, the hot sun was shining directly on Amina and her children. Flies were buzzing around, and the dust from the road was flying into the air. Amina began to panic. "Oh God," she thought, "if nobody buys this garri today, my children will not eat tonight. The wood and kerosene will be wasted." Her legs felt like blocks of wood, and her throat was very dry. She had not tasted a drop of water all morning. Just then, around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, a woman walking past stopped. She was wearing a neat green dress and holding a leather handbag. She was a school teacher named Mrs. Ngozi. She was walking home from her school, and she looked very tired. Mrs. Ngozi stopped because she noticed something special about Amina's basin. Even though Amina was standing in the dust, her basin was perfectly clean. There was a clean white cloth covering the garri to keep the flies away. When Amina lifted the cloth, the garri inside looked like beautiful pure white crystals. There was no dirt, no black spots, and no sand inside it. "Young woman," Mrs. Ngozi said, leaning closer to look, "did you fry this garri yourself?" "Yes, ma," Amina said quickly, her heart beating fast. "I made it this morning. It is very clean, and it does not have any sand at all. Please try it." 4. Amina used a tiny spoon to scoop a little bit of the dry garri and placed it in Mrs. Ngozi's hand. Mrs. Ngozi put the grains into her mouth and chewed. Suddenly her eyes went wide. The garri was incredibly crunchy, and it had the perfect, slightly sour taste that Nigerians love. "Oh my goodness!" Mrs. Ngozi shouted. clapping her hands together. "This is the best garri I have tasted in this town for a very long time. Most people sell garri full of sand and stones that hurt the teeth, but yours is as clean as snow." Mrs. Ngozi turned around and called out to some other women walking by, "Hey, come and see. Come and buy from this young mother. Her garri is excellent." Hearing the teacher's loud voice, 3 more women stopped. They tasted the garri too, and they loved it. "Give me 4 cups," the first woman said. "Give me 6 cups," another one shouted, pulling out her purse. Suddenly a crowd began to form around the old mango tree. Amina's hands began to fly. Scoop, pour, tie, scoop, pour, tie. She used the metal cup to measure the garri into small nylon bags for the customers. She was smiling so hard her cheeks hurt. The paper money and coins were entering her hands rapidly. By 5 o'clock, the bottom of the plastic basin appeared. Every single grain of garri was gone. The basin was completely empty. Amina sat down on the wooden stool, her body breathing a heavy sigh of relief. She looked at the money in her lap. She had never held this much money before. She immediately took some coins and walked to a food vendor nearby. She bought a big soft loaf of fresh bread and a small tin of sweet liquid milk. She ran back to the mango tree and gave the food to Toby and Chidi. The children's eyes lit up with joy. They tore the bread with their small hands, dipped it into the sweet milk, and ate happily. Their bellies were finally full, and they were smiling and laughing again. Amina watched them eat, and her heart was full of gratitude. But she did not spend the rest of the money. She knew this was just the beginning. When they got back to their tiny room that evening, Amina searched through a pile of old things in the corner. She found an old, empty Milo chocolate beverage tin made of metal. It had a yellow plastic lid on top. She washed the tin carefully and dried it by the window. Then she took her small knife and carefully cut a thin, narrow hole right through the center of the plastic lid. Amina counted the money she made. She took out the money she needed to buy more raw cassava and firewood for tomorrow. After that, she was left with 3 shiny coins and 1 small paper note. This was her true profit, her secret savings. She held the coins in her hand. One by one, she dropped them through the small hole in the plastic lid. Clink, clink, clink. The metal coins hit the bottom of the tin with a loud, beautiful sound. Amina placed the Milo tin high up on a wooden shelf where the children could not reach it. She looked at the tin in the dark and made a solemn promise to herself. No matter how hard tomorrow is, I will never open this tin. I will drop a coin inside it every single day until it is full. The loud clink of that first coin became the most important sound in Amina's life. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. Every single night, after the children were asleep and the cooking fire was dead, Amina would sit by the window and count her little profit. Clink, clink, clink! The money dropped into the Milo tin. Slowly, the empty tin began to feel heavy when she lifted it from the high shelf. But life did not become easy. The life of a street seller is like a roller coaster. Some days are good, and some days are very bad. One dark afternoon, while Amina was at the market, a terrible storm started. The wind blew very hard, making a loud whoosh whoosh sound. The sky turned completely black. Before Amina could pack her basin, a heavy wind rushed under the old thatch roof of her small frying shed at home and tore it completely away. The grass roof flew into the air like a bird and landed in the mud, broken into pieces. When Amina walked back home with her children, her heart broke. Her small outdoor kitchen was ruined. The ground where she used to sit and fry her cassava was now a big pool of dirty water. "Oh no!" Amina cried, holding her head. "How can I fry garri tomorrow? If the fire gets wet, it will not burn. If I do not fry, we will not eat." She looked up at the high shelf inside her room. She looked at the Milo tin. She knew that if she opened the tin, she would find enough money to buy new grass and wood to build a beautiful new roof. She stretched her hand out to touch the tin. Her fingers were shaking. She wanted to break the plastic lid open. But then she stopped herself. She remembered her promise. "No," she said, pulling her hand back. "If I spend this money now, I will remain a poor street seller forever. This money is not for fixing roofs. This money is for changing our lives." Instead of breaking the tin, Amina chose the hard way. The next morning she did not build a roof. She simply dug a small hole in the wet ground, placed her sticks of wood inside, and covered the fire with an old, bent piece of metal zinc she found on the road. The hot sun came out and beat directly on her skin as she worked. Because there was no roof, the sun burned her face, her neck, and her arms. Her skin became dark and rough from the combination of the hot sun and the fierce heat of the frying fire. But she did not stop. She just wiped the sweat from her eyes and kept stirring the garri. As the months passed, another big problem came. One bright morning, a greedy man wearing a dirty uniform walked into the market. He was a local council taxman, and everybody knew him to be a bully. He walked around with a big stick, taking money from poor market women. He stopped right in front of Amina's clean basin. He put his hands on his hips and barked, "Hey, you, where is your market tax money? You must pay me 500 naira right now." Amina gasped, 500 naira? "Sir, please, I do not have that kind of money today. I am just a poor mother selling from a basin. I have not even sold up to 3 cups of garri this morning." The man became very angry. He raised his heavy stick in the air. "I don't care. If you don't pay me right now, I will kick this basin, and all your white garri will pour into the dirty gutter." Toby and Chidi shrank back in fear, hiding behind their mother's skirt. Amina looked at the man's angry eyes. She knew she had some money hidden in her pocket to buy cassava for the next day, but if she gave it to him, her business would stall. Once again, she thought of her secret Milo tin at home. She could easily run home, get a few notes, and pay this bad man to leave her alone. But Amina looked the man straight in the face. She knelt down on the dirty ground and began to beg him with a humble voice. "Please, sir, have mercy on my little children. Look at them, they have not eaten. Let me sell today, and tomorrow I will pay you double. Please, in the name of God." Other market women started shouting at the man too. "Leave her alone, she is just a struggling mother." The man hissed loudly, spat on the ground, and walked away to bother someone else. Amina stood up and dusted her knees. She had saved her business, and more importantly, her secret tin remained safe and untouched. 3 long years passed in this manner. Toby was now 8 years old, and Chidi was 6. They were growing bigger and stronger. They understood how hard their mother was working, so they wanted to help her. Every day after returning from the local school, they would not go out to play football or hide and seek with the other village children. Instead, they sat on small stools next to Amina in the outdoor kitchen. With their small hands, Toby and Chidi would help peel the muddy brown skin off the cassava roots. Chidi would wash the white cassava in a bucket of clean water until it sparkled. while Toby would help his mother carry the lighter bags of charcoal. Working together, they became like a small, strong army fighting against poverty. One quiet Sunday evening, Amina went to the high shelf to dust the Milo tin. As she lifted it, she almost dropped it because it was incredibly heavy. It felt like a big block of solid stone. She shook it, but there was no clink-clink sound anymore. Why? Because the tin was completely packed tight with money. There was no single empty space left inside it. Amina brought the tin down and placed it in the middle of the floor. Toby and Chidi ran over and sat in a circle around it, their eyes wide with excitement. "Mommy, are we going to open it today?" Chidi asked, clapping her hands. Amina smiled, her heart racing with excitement. "Yes, my children, today we open the tin." She took her kitchen knife and carefully pried the yellow plastic lid off the top. The lid popped off with a loud pop. Amina turned the tin upside down and poured everything out onto the floor mat. Whoosh! A massive mountain of money spilled out. There were hundreds of shiny coins, crumpled 5 naira notes, 10 naira notes, and 50 naira notes. It looked like a treasure from a movie. The three of them began to count the money, separating the coins from the paper notes. They counted for a long time. When Amina finally calculated the total amount, her jaw dropped. It was a very large amount of money. It was more money than she had ever seen in her entire life. She sat back on the floor, staring at the pile of wealth. Her mind started racing with big, beautiful plans. She looked at her rough, blistered hands, hands that were raw and sore from grating cassava manually on a sharp tin sheet for years. "Tomorrow morning," Amina whispered, her voice trembling with joy as she looked at Toby and Chidi, "everything changes. I am not going to grate cassava with my bare hands anymore. We are going to buy a real grinding machine, and we are going to move out of the street corner." Amina did exactly what she promised. The very next morning, she packed the large mountain of money into a sturdy cloth bag, held her children's hands, and walked to the big town center. She did not look back at the old mango tree. She walked straight into a shop that sold heavy farming equipment and pointed at a brand new manual cassava grinding machine. It was made of heavy green iron, with a big silver wheel and a sharp metal mouth that could crush a whole basket of cassava in just 1 minute. With the rest of the money, Amina walked to the main roadside where many people passed every day. She paid for a small wooden kiosk painted in bright yellow. It had a strong roof made of real zinc, a wooden door with a padlock, and a wide front window where she could display her goods. They installed the green machine right inside the kiosk. When Amina turned the big silver wheel for the first time, the machine made a loud, proud sound. Clack, 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 clack. It was the loudest sound on the street, and to Amina's ears it sounded like beautiful music. No more grating cassava with a sharp tin plate until her fingers bled. Now, Toby would drop the white cassava roots into the machine's metal mouth. Chidi would turn the wheel, and crunch, 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 the cassava would turn into smooth paste in seconds. Amina's work became 3 times faster, and she could fry 10 times more garri than before. But as the loud clack, clack, clack of the machine brought more speed, it also brought a new kind of trouble. The other market women who used to sell near her saw her new yellow kiosk and her shining green machine. Instead of being happy for her, their hearts filled with jealousy. "Look at her," whispered a woman who sold pepper nearby, narrowing her eyes. "Just a few years ago, she was a dirty girl crying in the mud. Now she has a machine." Where did she get the money? It must be bad money. The jealous women started spreading nasty rumors around the neighborhood. They told the customers, "Do not buy garri from Amina anymore. She uses juju magic to make her garri taste sweet. If you eat her garri, your belly will ache and bad luck will follow you." People in the town were superstitious. When they heard the rumors, they became afraid. For 2 whole weeks, old customers would walk past Amina's yellow kiosk and look away. Nobody stopped to buy. The beautiful white garri sat in large basins inside the kiosk, getting cold. Amina sat on her wooden stool inside the quiet kiosk, listening to the empty clack-clack of her machine. Her heart was deeply hurt. She had never stolen from anyone. She had only worked hard until her skin burned. "Mommy," Toby said, looking out the window at the empty street, "why are they lying against us? Why is nobody buying our garri?" Amina took a deep breath. She looked at her children and remembered all the storms they had survived. "My children," she said gently, "when people throw stones at you, you do not throw stones back. You take those stones and build a house. We will not fight them with words. We will fight them with excellence." Amina decided to change her strategy completely. She realized that if she wanted to beat the rumors, she had to make her garri look different from every other garri in the market. She bought a roll of clear, shiny polythene nylon bags. She neatly packed her crisp white garri inside the clean bags, sealing the tops carefully so no dust could enter. Then, she used a small piece of bright red ribbon to tie a beautiful bow at the top of each bag. She took a black marker and wrote a name on the front of every package, "Amina's Royal Garri." It no longer looked like regular market garri. It looked like a beautiful gift you would buy in a fancy store in the big city. The next morning, Amina did not wait for customers to come to her kiosk. She took 10 bags of her royal garri and walked to the busy bus park where the big interstate buses stopped to load passengers traveling all the way to Lagos. The bus drivers were always hot, tired, and hungry. Amina walked up to a big tired driver sitting by his bus steering wheel. "Good morning, sir," she said with a bright, respectful smile. "Please take this bag of Amina's royal garri. It is a free gift for you. Taste it and see." The driver looked surprised. He opened the clean bag, poured a little of the white garri into his palm and threw it into his mouth. Crunch, crunch. His eyes lit up. "Ah, this is wonderful. It has no sand at all, and it is very crispy. My wife has been complaining about the dirty garri in Lagos. Young woman, can I buy 5 more bags right now to take to my family?" "Yes, sir," Amina said joyfully. The other drivers and passengers in the bus park saw the big driver drinking the garri happily. They rushed out of their buses shouting. The drivers loved the clean packaging because it did not spill inside their vehicles. Every day the drivers would return from Lagos and drive straight to Amina's yellow kiosk, buying dozens of packages to sell to rich people in the city. Amina's business was booming like never before. One hot Friday afternoon, while the machine was making its usual clack 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 sound, a very long shiny black car with dark tinted windows drove slowly down the dusty road. It was a luxury car that only top government officials or multi-millionaires drove. The car stopped directly in front of Amina's yellow kiosk. The heavy door opened, and a tall rich businessman stepped out. He was wearing a costly traditional white outfit, a golden watch that sparkled in the sun, and he held a smooth leather briefcase. He wiped his face with a clean white handkerchief and walked straight into the kiosk. Amina and her children froze. The room became very quiet as the machine slowed down to a stop. The rich man looked at the beautiful bags with red ribbons on the shelf. He picked one up, read the name aloud, and turned to Amina. "Are you the woman who makes this Amina's royal Garri?" he asked in a deep, powerful voice. "Yes, sir," Amina said, her voice shaking a little bit. "I am Amina." The man smiled broadly and opened his briefcase. "My name is Chief Adebayo. I own 3 large supermarkets in Lagos. A bus driver brought a bag of your garri to my house last week and my family loved it. I want to buy 1,000 bags of this exact royal garri to sell in my supermarkets and I need them delivered by next week." Amina's breath caught in her throat. Her heart leaped so hard it felt like it would jump out of her mouth. 1,000 bags! She had never made that much garri in her whole life. Amina stood completely frozen inside her yellow kiosk, staring at Chief Adebayo. Her ears were ringing. 1,000 bags? She thought. How can a poor woman like me make 1,000 bags of royal garri in just one week? She looked around her tiny wooden kiosk. Right now she only had 5 bags finished and sitting on her shelf. Chief Adebayo looked at her through his shiny glasses. He could see that she was afraid. He reached inside his heavy leather briefcase and pulled out a thick bundle of brand new crisp banknotes. The money smelled like a fresh print shop. He placed the heavy bundle right on her wooden counter. "This is a cash advance," Chief Adebayo said with a kind smile. "It is the money for you to buy all the materials you need. If you can deliver the 1,000 bags by next Friday morning, a big delivery truck will come here to pick them up and I will pay you the rest of your money. Can you do it, Amina?" Amina looked down at the thick bundle of money. Then she looked out the window at Toby and Chidi. Her children were looking at her with wide eyes, holding their breaths. Toby gave her a small nod, as if to say, "Mommy, we can do it." Amina took a deep breath, puffed out her chest, and looked the rich man straight in the eyes. "Yes, Chief," she said clearly and strongly. "I can do it. Your garri will be ready next week Friday, by the grace of God." "Good," Chief Adebayo said, nodding with satisfaction. He shook her hand, stepped back into his long black luxury car, and drove away, leaving a cloud of dust behind. As soon as the car disappeared, Toby and Chidi jumped up and down, cheering and shouting with joy. "Mommy, we are rich. We got a big contract." "Calm down, my children," Amina said, though her own heart was dancing. "A contract is not success until you finish the work. We have a mountain to climb, and we must start moving right now." Amina did not waste a single second. She took the thick bundle of money and went to work. First, she ran to the village square and hired 20 strong young women who were also single mothers struggling to feed their babies. She told them, "Come and work with me for 1 week. I will pay you good money every single day, and I will provide food for your children." The women were so happy they wept and praised God. Next, Amina rented 5 more heavy green manual grinding machines and placed them in a wide open yard behind her kiosk. She bought 10 massive black iron frying pans and tons of dry firewood. By Monday morning, the yard was like a giant ant-hill. It was full of life and noise. Clack, 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 clack. All the machines were turning at the same time. The 20 women were divided into groups. Some were peeling the mountain of brown cassava roots, some were washing them in big plastic drums of water, and others were sitting over the blazing fires, stirring the white garri with flat wooden sticks. Everything was going perfectly until Tuesday night. Suddenly, the sky turned ugly. The moon disappeared behind thick, angry clouds. Boom! A terrible sound of thunder shook the ground. Then the sky opened up, and a heavy, wicked rain began to fall. It was not a normal rain. It was a non-stop tropical storm that lasted for 3 whole days. The rain turned the whole village into a big sea of thick, sticky mud. On Thursday morning, a big problem happened. The local farmer sent a message to Amina. "We are sorry, Amina. The rain has flooded our farms. The ground is too muddy and heavy. We cannot pull the cassava roots out of the earth. We cannot bring you any more cassava." Amina's heart stopped. She needed 3 more truckloads of cassava to reach her target of 1,000 bags, and the deadline was tomorrow morning. The 20 workers stopped working. They sat under a zinc shed, shivering from the cold wind, looking helpless. "Amina, what do we do?" one of the women asked, crying. "The ground is too bad. We should just give up and tell the chief to give us more time." "No!" Amina shouted above the sound of the falling rain. "If we fail this rich man, he will never trust a poor market woman again. We will lose our big chance. If the farmers cannot pull the cassava, then we will go to the farm and pull it ourselves." Amina tied her wrapper tightly around her waist. She took off her slippers and stepped directly into the cold, pouring rain and the deep mud. She walked for 2 miles to the cassava farm, and her 20 workers followed her, inspired by her courage. When they reached the farm, the mud was up to Amina's knees. It was heavy and slippery. Amina knelt down in the dirty water. She grabbed the green stem of a large cassava plant with her bare hands. She pulled with all her might. Heave! Heave! Her muscles ached. Her hands were scratched by sharp sticks, and mud splashed all over her face and hair. "Pull!" Amina cheered, her voice loud and fierce. "Think of your children. Pull!" With a loud slug sound, the giant cluster of white cassava roots came out of the earth. The other women cheered and began to dig and pull with furious energy. They worked inside the heavy rain all through Thursday afternoon and into the dark night. Nobody stopped to rest. By midnight, they had carried all the cassava back to the yard. Amina's eyes were bloodshot from the thick smoke of the wet firewood, and her whole body was shaking with cold and fatigue. She had not slept for 4 days. Her fingers were blistered and bleeding, but she kept a hot wooden stick in her hand, stirring the final batch of garri over the roaring fire. Toby and Chidi were right beside her, sealing the clean bags with the red ribbons. At exactly 5 a.m. on Friday morning, the rain finally stopped. The sun began to rise, painting the sky with beautiful streaks of gold. Amina dropped her stirring stick and collapsed onto a wooden stool, completely exhausted. She looked at the center of the yard. There, stacked neatly in high, beautiful towers, were exactly 1,000 bags of Amina's royal garri, each one tied with a bright red bow. They had done it. At exactly 7 a.m., a massive white delivery truck came rumbling down the road and stopped in front of the yard. Chief Adebayo stepped out of his car, looking immaculate in a fresh blue outfit. He walked into the yard and looked at the mountain of neat bags. Then he looked at Amina, who was covered from head to toe in black suit, grey ash and yellow mud. The chief smiled with deep respect. He walked up to Amina and bowed his head slightly. "You are a woman of iron, Amina," he said softly. "Many men would have given up in that storm, but you kept your word." He signaled his assistant, who brought out a heavy metal envelope. He handed it to Amina. Inside the envelope was the remaining payment, a massive fortune of high-denomination naira notes. Amina held the heavy envelope to her chest, and for the first time in years, she cried tears of pure and unadulterated joy. She did not use the money to buy gold jewelry or fancy designer lace dresses. The very next hour, she washed the mud off her face, put on her best clean clothes, and walked straight into the biggest bank in the town center. The bank security men and the tellers looked at her with funny faces because her dress still smelled faintly of wood smoke and cassava. But when Amina sat down before the bank manager and opened her heavy envelope of money, the manager's eyes popped open. He immediately stood up, bowed politely, and poured a cup of cold water for her. "Welcome, madam," the manager said with a wide, respectful smile. "How can we help you today?" "I want to open a big corporate business account," Amina said, her voice steady and proud. "And I want to buy a large..."
The power of one coin. A very great journey begins with one coin.